I usually don't like to use the word pretentious since it's overused just so often in film criticism. But I haven't used it in a while to describe like a film. And this movie is the very definition of pretentious. We're going to go ahead and we're going to move on to the next part of my show, and that is my review for Eileen, chat, this new neo-noir thriller that was just released in theaters not too long ago. I imagine this movie is hoping for some award attention. I'm not sure if it's going to get it, and I'll explain as to why. But for those that need a bit of a background, a bit of a synopsis for the film, set in 1960s Massachusetts, Eileen explores the unusual and seemingly mysterious relationship between two women who work at a juvenile detention center. Now, before kind of getting into the film itself, I wanted to briefly talk about, noir thrillers and neo-noir thrillers. There are many noir films that I love, whether it be classic Alfred Hitchcock films like Vertigo or Rope, or name any, Alfred Hitchcock movies. He's made so many excellent thrillers, throughout his career. Or noir movies that came out, decades later, like L.A. Confidential, one of my favorite movies of all time. There's something, I attribute like coziness, intimacy, to these types of movies. That's what makes them to me like just so captivating. From the settings, just bathed in like shadows and cigarette smoke, to the many charismatic and sometimes nefarious performances of its cast of characters. There's just so many things that are, just captivating and honestly, I think timeless about those types of movies that personally just, really work for me. And on the outside, especially looking at the trailers, Eileen seems to fit the bill perfectly. The technical side of things, the film has a lot going for it. The wintry 1960s Massachusetts setting is perfect for a noir thriller, with the shadowy color palette that's so often just bathed in red and orange and yellow light. It instantly creates that intimate, cozy feeling that I just mentioned, I was just talking about earlier. And just the constant cigarette and exhaust smoke just swirling around in the cold air just only adds to that feeling and that setting. The problem is that though this movie on a technical level perfectly replicates the setting of a noir film or a neo-noir film, it completely fails to tell an engaging story due to its underwritten characters and honestly, its extremely meandering plot. Thomas and Mackenzie, who you might recognize from movies like, Old or Last Night in Soho, another neo-noir thriller, plays the titular, Eileen in the film. And, we learned early on that she's a disturbed character. She works at this juvenile detention center as well. She's kind of ostracized by her peers. She often daydreams about killing herself and killing her abusive and a very erratic father who's, a retired police officer who's clearly going insane. And she becomes infatuated with a new character, played by Anne Hathaway. And she starts to have a sort of relationship with her throughout the movie, or at least the movie tries to seemingly create the idea of a relationship between the two of them. The thing that's wrong with this movie is between her and Anne Hathaway, she's not doing anything that she just hasn't done in another noir film before. She's just doing the same thing. She's just playing this mousy character who is so introspective and is always, so insular. And it's like, okay, like I've seen you do this. I can see why you were picked for this role. But is there gonna be like a thing that's gonna be revealed in this movie? The film constantly teases the idea that she's gonna do something or Anne Hathaway's character is going to do something truly horrific at some point. And it's all going to revolve around, their relationship, right? But honestly, it takes so long to finally get to that point, that resolution, if you even want to call it that. And the many things that could have happened just don't. And the film just has like this twist in it. Like there is, I suppose, a twist in the movie that is unexpected, but also just kind of nonsensical and honestly pretty dull. Anne Hathaway is very much presented as this femme fatale of the movie, and she initially draws Thomasin McKenzie's character of Eileen in, along with us, the viewers. But after about an hour of this relationship that she's engaging in, you suddenly realize there isn't really anything interesting about her as a person, or her actions at all. So much of this movie is just this kind of them going back and forth. Will they, won't they? It's like, okay, they're lesbians, I get it. Or at the very least bisexual. It's like, are we going to see like an interesting engagement between the two of them? Is their relationship going to go, it's going to have its highs, if it's going to have its lows? Is there going to be these shocking reveals and they're doing something, manipulating people? It's like, not really. Not at all. In this movie, it's basically like an hour of them just kind of talking back and forth. Thomasin McKenzie dealing with her abusive father, having fantasies of killing herself and killing him, and that's really it. And it's so incredibly frustrating. And then when we get to like the third act just kind of happens. The first two thirds of this movie is basically like an hour and 10 minutes, and the last third's and thankfully it is short, it doesn't feel short, but the last third is like 15 minutes, and it's like, okay, so what's this gonna be, this big reveal where all of our, our two main leads are kind of, been going back and forth of each other, like what's gonna be the thing that brings them together or explodes this entire relationship. And honestly, like the final act, it really doesn't have anything to do with Eileen, or even like the weird relationship that she has with Anne Hathaway. It's just this uninteresting element in the film that was just dead set on occasionally commenting on, like there's another third party like in this movie, that's like, oh yeah, an abusive kid at some point that Anne Hathaway becomes obsessed with. But it really doesn't have anything to do with the relationship she has with Thomasin McKenzie's character, like at all. But then so much of the third act just revolves around that, and it is so little to do with any of the main characters to begin with. It's like, well, what was the point of all this? Why didn't you just focus on that third act thing, if that's what the end result was going to be, and actually have that layered throughout the stories and have like an integral part, instead of this kind of uninspired will they, won't they, dark, lesbian romance. And they just don't at all. The story is just kind of non-existent in this movie. It's almost as if the filmmakers think that because they made a period piece in the 1960s, that automatically just makes the film fantastic. And it just doesn't. It's a great looking movie, yes, but the story just meanders. It just meanders and feels so slow, and you have this back and forth between Anne Hathaway and Thomasin McKenzie. It's like, oh, who's really? Maybe this person is truly the femme fatale. Maybe this person's the femme fatale. And by the end, it's like, neither of them are. Neither of them are, really. And it's like, well, we got to end the movie somehow. And the third act just comes. It's just there, and it's completely rushed. And the ending in this movie sucks. The ending in this movie is absolutely terrible. The film literally just stops without an interesting resolution to the conflict. They just kind of just introduce at the end. It's like, oh shit, now here's this new element that we've added. It has nothing to do with the two of these women in the relationship. Are they gay? Are they bisexual? Who fucking knows? One of them's crazy. Maybe the other one's crazy. Who cares? But now there's this conflict, and now they have to deal with it. And then the movie just kind of ends. I usually don't like to use the word pretentious, since it's overused just so often in film criticism. But I haven't used it in a while to describe like a film. And this movie is the very definition of pretentious. It's pretty looking, but very pretentious. It's like, yes, you can have the aesthetics of a noir, you can be a period piece, that's all great. But when your characters have the depth of a puddle. And just because you put them in period piece clothes and you have one talk of a sultry voice and you have the other one that talks like in a mousy voice and has disturbed thoughts, that doesn't make them fantastic characters. And it feels like that's what the movie is like. Oh, we just kind of have that. We just have these two characters have these very different personalities, and we throw them together in a scene and they talk, and then we move on, and then we have them talk again. It's like we go from The Office and then we go to them in a club and they're dancing, maybe they kiss each other, but it amounts to nothing. It literally amounts to nothing, and they throw in a third act that is not relevant to anything else that's been going on in the film. Which is like, again, you focus solely on these two women throughout the entire movie, and then you put in this kind of like tertiary character that we're like, yeah, we've seen before. Some of the women had interactions with, but now has great importance to everything. And that's the resolution, or a lack of a resolution. It's just a really unsatisfying movie that seems to just be resting its laurels on its aesthetic. And I was really bothered by that. So, yeah, I mean, I told you this is a short review because there's literally nothing there. There is no subtext. There is just text, and the text isn't that great to begin with. So, yeah, Eileen is, again, a gorgeous-looking movie with very little else going on in it, outside of its aesthetics, outside of its production design. I think the actors are just, again, they're not really giving anything particularly interesting to do, other than like, well, act like, you know, a mousy girl and act like you're a femme fatale occasionally. But outside of that, this is a pretty bad movie, and I'm not too familiar with this filmmaker or their work. But I would hope that if they do another film sometime in the near future, that they will at least attempt to add a little more depth to it, other than just focusing on the aesthetics. Because again, just because you make it a period piece, just because you make it a noir film and you have some nice lighting, it doesn't mean it's going to be a good movie. You need to have something actually there. You need to have the plot actually make sense and have at least somewhat of a resolution that is tied to the first two acts. And it doesn't come out of the ether itself. It's a really frustrating film. And I mean, I'm never going to tell anyone not to see something. I'll, of course, like, make up your own mind, but go in knowing that you're not going to get a resolution that makes any sense in this movie. So, to be perfectly honest, chat, yeah, Eileen is a pretty terrible film. However, that's just how I feel. I'm actually very curious to hear other people's thoughts on this movie. If you have indeed seen, I was the only one in the audience today that saw that. It was an audience of one. The movie was presented to me. And so I was able to kind of talk shit throughout this film, like going, what the hell is even happening at one point? So feel free, please let me know your thoughts on Eileen. Did you dislike it as much as I did, or did you hate it, or did you love it? I'm very curious, very curious.